Two little girls, no older than 8, wandered hand in hand through the fading autumn woods of Willow Creek. Their giggles rose and fell with the rustle of pine needles, sounding like a song only children could carry. The air smelled of sap and cool earth, and every step they took scattered dry leaves that crunched like whispers underfoot. Beside them limped their faithful German shepherd, Max, a retired K-9 officer whose best days of service might have been behind him, but whose amber eyes still glowed with the fire of duty. He walked slowly now, his joints stiff from age, but his every step spoke of watchfulness. Then, all at once, the world shifted. The forest that had moments ago seemed safe and playful grew still. A shadow moved where none had been before. The laughter of the twins cut short. A sharp hiss split the air. Max staggered and crumpled to the ground. Before either girl could scream, rough hands grabbed them, ropes bit into their wrists, and strips of silver tape sealed their voices. Dragged through the trees, they were thrown into a rotting cabin on the forest's edge. What happened next would not be remembered as just another kidnapping. It would become a battle of love, loyalty, and faith. And if there was ever proof that God sent his angels to earth, sometimes those angels came with fur and fangs. The late autumn sun stretched low over Willow Creek, washing the little town in gold. Wooden houses lined the narrow streets, their clapboard siding glowing as if painted with firelight. Porch steps sagged under the weight of pumpkins left over from the harvest. Rocking chairs creaked gently in the breeze, and the white church steeple caught the light like a candle lifted in prayer. Beyond the rooftops, the pine forest loomed, a wall of green and shadow, its mysteries older than the town itself. The people of Willow Creek knew the woods well. Children used its winding paths to cut home from school. Hunters rose before dawn to follow the deer that slipped like ghosts between the trees. But by evening, when the sun tilted low and the air sharpened with chill, the forest changed. Long. Shadows stretched across the ground, and even the boldest boys quickened their steps, glancing behind them, though nothing seemed to follow. On that afternoon, Lily and Hazel Brown left the schoolyard earlier than usual. They were twins, alike in age and looks, but different in spirit. Lily, the elder by minutes, carried herself with a quiet seriousness, like a little mirror of her mother. Her honey-blonde hair was pulled neatly into a ponytail that never seemed to fall out of place. Her green eyes were steady, her lips pressed into silence as if she stored her words for the right time. She wore a faded cardigan buttoned to her chin and sneakers scrubbed as clean as playground dust would allow. Inside her backpack rattled a pair of blunt scissors and a folded paper. She hadn't forgotten her task. Bring home asters for Mom, Hazel. On the other hand was a whirlwind. Her blonde hair had slipped loose from its ribbon, framing cheeks still pink from play. Her yellow shirt bore dried splashes of paint. Her pink leggings sagged at the knees with stains from countless tumbles. She could hardly walk without bouncing, and her fingers could not touch anything without spinning it, tossing it, or turning it into a game. If Lily was calm water, Hazel was pure spark. Behind them padded Max. The old German shepherd walked with the dignity of a soldier who had traded patrols for porches, but not forgotten his training. His coat, once sleek, now carried streaks of gray along his muzzle. A scar curved under his ear, a memory of years on duty. His legs stiffened when he walked too far, yet his ears still flicked at every sound, and his nose tasted every scent drifting on the wind. Though his body had slowed, his loyalty burned unbroken. To the twins, he was no ordinary dog. He was their silent guardian, their angel with paws. Their father often told tales of Max's heroics, chasing criminals, finding missing hikers, braving storms. The girls believed with a child's certainty that nothing bad could ever reach them while Max was near. "Come on," Hazel urged, tugging Lily's sleeve. "The flowers will be gone if we're late." Lily hitched her backpack higher and nodded. Mom only likes the purple ones. We have to find the best patch. Hazel skipped ahead, already leading the way. The ones by the creek. That's where they're the prettiest. The shortcut path wound along the water's edge before bending back toward town. They had walked it dozens of times, but under the amber autumn light, the forest seemed both welcoming and secret. Pine needles hushed their footsteps, and the cool wind carried the scent of sap, moss, and damp earth. Max circled near them, his nose working in patient sweeps. A rabbit had passed not long ago. The musk of a fox lingered faintly. A neighbor's terrier had strayed this way. All familiar, all harmless. But when they reached a fork, Max stiffened. An old utility track split from the main trail, nearly swallowed by weeds. A crooked sign warned, "No motorized vehicles, utility access only." Max sniffed the soil. The faint reek of engine oil clung where no car should be. His amber eyes narrowed. Hazel's call drew him back to their side, but his pace slowed, his ears sharper now. The asters appeared in a sudden burst of color, a patch of violet blazing in a clearing where the sun broke through. Lily crouched with careful hands, cutting stems as if she were already a florist. Hazel, too restless for patience, gathered pine cones for decoration. "Mom will say it looks like a crown," she declared proudly. "She'll say it looks messy," Lily replied, though her smile softened her words. Their laughter filled the trees, bright and unafraid. For that brief moment, the forest seemed theirs alone. Across town, the bell over Patel's store jingled. Mason Wheeler, 9 years old and all wiry elbows and mismatched socks, carried his grandmother's shopping list. His hair was chestnut brown, his eyes lake blue and endlessly curious. Raised by Ruth Wheeler, his sturdy grandmother with a voice equal parts gentle and commanding, Mason was used to rules. Fetch milk, flour, peppermint tea, and don't forget the licorice, she'd reminded him. It's for guests, not you. Mason smiled to himself. He knew half would be gone by nightfall. Robbie Patel stood behind the counter, his salt and pepper mustache twitching as he smiled. He had run the store for 20 years and treated every customer like kin. "Science project coming along?" he asked. "Not unless vinegar and baking soda count as engineering," Mason said with a sheepish grin. Before Mr. Patel could reply, the door chimed again. 2 men entered. The first, tall and wiry, wore a too-new camouflage jacket. His jaw was rough with stubble, and the tattoo of a deer skull marked the back of his hand. The second was smaller, restless, his gray hoodie stained with grease. A scar cut across his temple like a pale thread. They muttered a greeting and drifted toward the magazines. Mason pretended to study comic books, but his ears caught every word. "Brown," the tall one muttered. "The rich guy. Construction," the wiry man answered. "Kids. 2 of them. Easy pickings. They always use that trail." Mason froze. Brown. In Willow Creek, there weren't many Browns. Only one family had twin girls, his friends Lily and Hazel. His stomach knotted. 1 million. Hillfold, the taller man added. The boy's chest tightened. The men paid for cigarettes and a phone card before leaving. Through the window, Mason glimpsed their rattling truck, the plate half buried in mud. He whispered the letters over and over. VQ, maybe WQ, burning them into memory. "You okay, son?" Mr. Patel asked gently. "Yes, sir," Mason forced out, clutching the grocery bag. He wanted to shout the warning, but the words stuck. Maybe he had misheard. Maybe it was nothing. He told himself he'd ask Lily tomorrow, just to be sure. Yet, as he stepped into the fading light, a chill traced his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Back in the woods, Lily tied her bouquet with Hazel's ribbon, the purple flowers glowing like lanterns in the dim light. Hazel crowned Max, with pine cones giggling when he shook them loose. The path home curved ahead, promising rooftops, warmth, and their mother's smile. but Max hesitated again. A sour tang drifted on the breeze. Exhaust, lingering too long where no car should. His fur bristled. He pressed close to the twins, brushing their legs, a silent reminder that he was there. The girls, lost in laughter, paid him no mind. Their arms full of flowers, they walked on, their voices floating through the pines like music. The shadows deepened. The forest kept its secrets. Somewhere far off, the town glowed softly in the dying light. Yet the air itself seemed to pause, holding its breath, as if the woods already knew what the girls did not. That danger had only just begun to stir. The forest had grown quieter as the sun slid lower, shadows stretching like fingers across the path. The twins were still chattering, their bouquet of asters swinging between them. When Max stopped dead in his tracks, his fur rose along his spine, a ridge of bristling instinct, his amber eyes fixed on the underbrush, ears straining forward. He growled low and rumbling, the kind of warning that meant danger was near, before Lily could ask what was. "Wrong!" A sharp sound cut the air. Like air escaping a tire, a dart whistled out of the brush. It struck Max square in the shoulder. The shepherd barked in pain, staggered, then tried to lunge forward, but his muscles betrayed him. His legs wobbled, and with a choked whine, he collapsed on the bed of pine needles. Hazel gasped. "Max!" Her cry was muffled almost instantly by a coarse cloth pressed against her face. A tall man, his camo jacket smelling of stale tobacco, wrapped an arm around her small frame. His other hand pulled a rough rope tight around her wrists. She kicked and thrashed, but he hissed in her ear, "Keep quiet, little girl." Lily barely had time to scream before the second man seized her. He was wiry quick with Ascar like a pale line cutting across his temple, his hoodie wire of oil and sweat. He forced a rag across her mouth and wound rope around her arms and ankles. Lily's green eyes widened in terror, but she could not cry out. The scissors she had used for flowers slipped from her pocket, falling into the dirt unnoticed. The two men worked with frightening efficiency. They tied both girls together with extra loops of rope, gagged them, and pulled cloth over their eyes. Hazel's muffled sobs shuddered through the silence. Lily tried to twist her hands free, but the knots were tight, biting into her skin. The men dragged the twins off the path through brush that scratched their legs until the sound of the creak was replaced by the hollow creak of wood. The destination was an abandoned cabin leaning against the edge of the forest like a weary sentinel. Once a logger shut, it now sagged with rot, its roof patched with rusted tin, windows boarded with planks nailed haphazardly. The door groaned open as the tall man shoved it, revealing a room that smelled of mildew, smoke, and old beer. Inside, the floor was littered with empty cans, a broken chair, and a mattress yellowed with mold. The men dropped the twins roughly onto the floorboards. Hazel whimpered, curling closer to Lily. The scarred man spat to the side, then muttered, "Boss will be pleased. Easy pickings, just like we said." The tall man crouched, adjusting Hazel's gag. His eyes were pale, almost gray, with a deadness that made her freeze. "Tomorrow your daddy pays up. You just sit quiet until then." Max's absence was a wound in the room. The girls could not see him, could not know if he still breathed out there among the needles. But the forest, though silent, still held his scent. Somewhere beyond the cabin walls, the shepherd lay unconscious, chest rising faintly with each shallow breath. At the Brown household, evening arrived with unease. Linda Brown, a woman in her mid-30s, with warm brown hair pinned back loosely, set the table with trembling hands. Her face, usually brightened by a patient smile, looked pale and drawn. She had prepared potato soup, the girls' favorite, but the bowls sat untouched. "Maybe they stopped at Mason's," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. Or maybe they went to the park. But David Brown, tall and broad-shouldered with the rugged look of a man used to construction sites, shook his head. His gray eyes betrayed the storm building inside him. They know the rules. They text when they're late. It's been too long. The phone rang. The shrill sound sliced through the room. David snatched it up. "Mr. Brown!" A voice rasped low and low, like gravel dragged across metal. "We've got your girls." David's chest tightened. "Who is this? Where are they?" "You don't ask questions," the voices sneered. "You listen. $1 million. Cash. Tomorrow morning, the old warehouse by the forest. You bring the money. You get your daughters. You call the cops. You bury them." The line went dead. Linda's knees buckled and she collapsed into a chair. Her hands clutched the edge of the table until her knuckles blanched. "Oh, God." "David, our babies." David stood frozen, phone still in hand, his breath shallow. His mind screamed at him to act, to do something, but his limbs felt like stone. He had built bridges, lifted steel, weathered storms on construction sites. But this helplessness was unbearable. Not far away, Mason Wheeler sat in his grandmother's kitchen, the grocery bag emptied on the counter. Ruth hummed, while she measured flour, her back straight as a board, her silver hair catching the lamplight. Mason nibbled on a stick of licorice, the sweetness turning to ash on his tongue. He couldn't shake the voices he'd overheard. Brown kids. 1 million. His heart had pounded when he first heard it, but he had convinced himself he was imagining things. Now, as the shadows deepened outside and the clock ticked louder, doubt clawed at him. Then a siren wailed somewhere across town. Mason dropped the licorice. "Nana," he whispered, "something's wrong." Before Ruth could ask, Mason grabbed his jacket and dashed out the door. His bicycle clattered over the gravel, tires squealing as he turned toward Main Street. He spotted flashing lights outside the police station and skidded to a stop. Inside, Martha Green, the town's police chief, was gathering her deputies. Martha was in her 40s, tall and broad-shouldered with dark auburn hair, pulled into a bun and eyes the color of storm clouds. Years of service had carved steadiness into her voice. People trusted her because she never wasted words. She wore her uniform neatly pressed, the badge gleaming under the fluorescent light. Mason burst through the door, breathless. "Chief Green, I think I know something about Lily and Hazel." Martha turned sharply. "What do you mean, son?" "They're gone, aren't they?" Mason blurted. His small hands twisted in the hem of his shirt. "At the store today, I heard 2 men. They said Brown's kids and $1 million. I didn't know if it was real, but Martha's expression hardened, though her voice stayed calm. She crouched, so her eyes met his. "You did right coming here, Mason. Tell me everything. Start with what they look like." As Mason described, the camo jacket, the scarred man, the green truck with a cracked tail light, Martha scribbled in her notepad. She placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "You're braver than you know. We'll find them." Outside, the deputies were already checking maps, marking forest access points. Martha straightened, voice firm. "All right, people. We've got 2 kids in danger, possibly armed suspects. Get units to the old logging roads and the warehouse perimeter. Quiet approach. We don't spook them." She glanced once at Mason, then at the worried faces of David and Linda, who had just arrived. "We move now." In the dark cabin at the forest edge, Lily and Hazel clung to each other, their small hands bound tightly with rope, brushed together until their fingers laced. Their breasts came fast through the cloth gags. The sound of the men's laughter in the next room was a jagged backdrop to their fear. They could not speak, but their eyes found each other in the slivers of dim light that leaked through the boards. Hazel's were wide and wet. Leah's burned with desperate steadiness. In that silence they gave each other the only comfort they could, the promise not to let go. Outside the forest waited, and somewhere beneath a blanket of pine needles, Max's chest rose and fell as the sedative dragged at his body. High Seers twitched once, then stilled. The night had only begun. The cabin smelled of mildew and dust, the kind of damp that clung to lungs and made every breath sting. The wooden planks groaned with each gust of wind that pressed against the walls, as if the building itself wanted to sigh but had long since forgotten how. In the corner, beneath a boarded-up window, where only thin ribbons of moonlight slipped through, Lily and Hazel lay curled, side by side. Their wrists and ankles were bound with coarse ropes, mouths gagged with cloth so tight it rubbed raw against their cheeks. Hazel's chest shook with silent sobs. She wanted to scream, but the cloth muffled even Thesmolist sound. Lily shifted closer, her shoulder pressing against her sister's. She could not speak either, yet her eyes searched Hazel's, green irises glowing faintly in the darkness. Hazel blinked back tears and nodded, clinging to her sister's gaze as though it were the only thread, keeping her from unraveling. For a moment, the fear softened. The message passed between them was clear, wordless, but strong. We're together. We will endure. From the other side of the wall came the murmur of the two men. The taller one laughed harshly, the sound rasping like gravel while the scarred man shuffled cards on the rickety table. The clink of bottles followed, then silence, then another laugh. The girls flinched at every sound. Outside, under the shroud of pine needles, Max still lay where he had fallen. The dart protruded faintly from his shoulder, his breath shallow and uneven. Each exhale made his chest rise a little less than the one before. His ears twitched occasionally, as if somewhere in the haze of drug sleep, he still listened for the footsteps of the girls he had sworn to guard. His body remembered what his mind could not yet command. Protect them. The forest whispered. Around him, branches creaking, an owl calling from high above. In the cabin, Lily tested her bonds, twisting her wrists against the rope until it burned. She winced but persisted, her small fingers trying to find a weakness. Hazel pressed her forehead against Lily's arm, shivering from the cold that seeped through the floorboards. There were no words for comfort now, only touch and breath. Back in town, David Brown sat alone in his office. The house had filled earlier with officers and voices, neighbors, murmuring outside. But now it was just him and the hum of the old desk lamp. The office smelled of paper, sawdust, and the faint tang of coffee left to cool. On the desk, beside blueprints and contracts, rested a frame photograph. Linda in, summer light, hair lifted by the breeze, arms wrapped around Lily and Hazel. Their smiles froze him, sharper than any blade. David was a man who had built everything from the ground up. Broad-shouldered from years of lifting steel beams, his palms were. Calloused from tools, even though he now signed more contracts than he hammered nails. In his late 30s, Hyson's boyish face had hardened with responsibility, but his gray eyes still held the restless determination of someone who had known poverty and clawed his way out. He had promised Linda back when they lived in a cramped apartment with second-hand furniture that he would build a better life. He kept that promise, at least in money, in comfort, in security, or so he thought. Now, with the phone silence pressing on him after that terrible call, he felt stripped of every success. What was $1 million compared to the lives of his daughters? He would give twice, 10 times that. Yet the number hung heavy in his mind, a figure that represented both his hard-won fortune and the threat that it might not be enough to save them. He pressed his fists against his eyes, memory flooding in unbidden. The night Lily was born, when he had whispered into her tiny ear that he would never fail her. Hazel came minutes later, her first cry louder than the storm outside. He had laughed and cried with equal measure. "I'll keep you safe," he had vowed. Now his vow felt like ash. The creak of boots interrupted his torment. Martha Green, the police chief, stood at the doorway. She carried herself with quiet authority, her auburn hair pulled back, her uniform neat even in the late hour. Her presence filled the room with steadiness, though her eyes bore the same worry as his own. "David," she said gently, setting her hat on the desk. "We may have something." He looked up, his voice rough. "Tell me." She opened a small notebook, pages scrolled with neat handwriting. "Your neighbor's boy, Mason Wheeler. He overheard two men this afternoon in Patel's store. Camo jacket, scar on his temple, driving a green pickup with a cracked tail light. He heard them mention your name and the ransom." David blinked, leaning back. "Mason. He's just a kid." "A brave one," Martha replied. "He described details that match what we know. I've sent deputies to check the logging roads in the old warehouse. We'll keep it quiet for now. Minimize the risk." For a moment, David felt a flicker. Thin, fragile, but their hope. He clung to it, the way a drowning man clings to driftwood. "So, you think we can find them?" Martha didn't answer right away. Her jaw tightened, her storm-gray eyes steady. "We'll do everything, David. But you need to be prepared. These men are dangerous. They're not bluffing. If they think we're closing in too fast, they may." She let the sentence trail. David's throat closed. He turned back to the photograph. "I can't lose them, Martha. I can't." She placed a hand on his shoulder, firm, grounding. "Then hold on to that. We'll bring them home." As she left, David remained at the desk, the silence folding in again. He stared at the photo, the smile of his daughters frozen in time. He whispered, so quietly, only the night could hear, "I won't fail you. Not again." The forest lay in a restless hush, the moon veiled by clouds that drifted like pale ships across the night sky. Crickets chirped in uneven rhythms, and somewhere deeper in the trees, a lone owl hooted, its call swallowed by the silence that followed. Beneath the heavy boughs of pine, Max stirred. The shepherd's body was sluggish, every muscle thick with the remnants of the tranquilizer. His breath rattled at first, uneven and shallow, but instinct pressed him upward. With a groan that was half growl, he rolled onto his stomach, claws scraping. The pine needles. The world wavered, blurred edges turning the shadows into ghosts. But then there it was, a thread of scent, fragile but undeniable sweat, rope, the faint sweetness of hazel shampoo, lavender mixed with autumn air. Lily's cardigan, worn soft with use, carried the smell of home. Max lowered his muzzle, inhaled again, and his training snapped into place. He had tracked fugitives across rivers, found missing hikers in snowstorms, followed trails so faint most men would never notice them. Retirement had dulled his joints, not his instincts. He pushed to his feet, wobbling once before steadying. Every nerve in his body screamed fatigue. Yet his purpose was clear. Step by step, Max followed the scent. He knows the ground where the girls had been dragged, the earth disturbed, pine needles crushed in a pattern only he could decipher. He avoided the jagged thorns along the path, moved around a rusted trap half buried in leaves, circled to find the direction again when the trail wavered. His gait was slower than in his younger days, but his determination burned bright. The night accepted him as one of its own, an old guardian walking with memory and devotion. At the cabin, the kidnappers had grown careless. Their bottles clinked, their voices slurred until finally the taller one slumped against the table, headling. The scarred man laughed once more before his voice faded into snores. Lily and Hazel lay still, their small fingers brushing through the ropes, eyes wide but silent. They did not know that Max was already moving toward them, each step bringing him closer. In another part of Willow Creek, headlights cut through the darkness as a convoy of patrol cars rolled slowly down a dirt road. Martha Green drove the lead vehicle, her eyes sharp, despite the late hour. The police chief kept both hands steady on the wheel, jaws set, auburn hair tucked tightly beneath her cap. She had led searches before, lost hunters, runaway teens. But this was different. These were children she knew, girls whose laughter she had heard at parades and Sunday fairs. The weight of that knowledge pressed against her chest like armor she could not remove. Beside her sat Mason Wheeler, his small frame dwarfed by the seatbelt. His knees bounced nervously, hands gripping the strap of his backpack as though it were a lifeline. His blue eyes flicked to the trees, straining to spot any clue in the shifting darkness. He wore a hooded sweatshirt that seemed too big for him. Sleeves tugged over his fists, and his hair stuck out beneath his cap in the stubborn tufts. Martha glanced at him, her tone gentler than usual. "You doing all right back there, Mason?" He swallowed hard, nodding. "I should have told someone sooner. If I had, maybe they wouldn't." His voice cracked. "You did tell someone," Martha interrupted firmly. "You told me, and because you did, we have a chance. Without you, we'd still be blind tonight." Her words settled on him like a blanket. Mason's shoulders relaxed a little. He turned back to the window, determination glinting through his worry. Behind them, Deputy Carl Henderson adjusted the beam of his flashlight. Carl was a man in his early 30s, tall with a rangy build, his brown hair clipped close. He had joined the force after returning from military service overseas, where he had learned patience and caution. He was the quiet type, speaking only when necessary, but this loyalty to Martha was absolute. Now he studied the tire marks that cut across the dirt road. "Tracks here," Carl called out. His voice was steady, low, wide tread, heavy load. Martha slowed the convoy. She stepped out, boots crunching on gravel, and crouched beside the marks. The light caught the distinct pattern, edges rough, uneven. She remembered Mason's description, a green truck with a cracked tail light. She looked at him. "This match what you saw." Mason peered down, eyes narrowing. It could be. Their truck was old. Tires looked tired like that. "That's good," Martha said. She rose, brushing her palms against her uniform. "We follow it. Quiet. No sirens. We don't want them spooked." The deputies nodded, checking radios and weapons. Mason climbed back into the car, heart hammering. He wasn't supposed to be there. He knew it. But Martha had insisted. "Sometimes the smallest witness holds the biggest piece of the puzzle," she told him. Tonight, Mason wanted to be useful to make up for every doubt he had swallowed earlier. Back beneath the trees, Max pressed forward. His breathing was heavier now, his legs stiff, but the sense grew stronger. He found fragments of rope fibers, snagged on a branch. Hazel's hair tangled with them. He paused, sniffed, and a soft whine slipped from his throat. The girls had passed here. They were near. He remembered the old training. Pause. Confirm. Move. His handler's voice, David's younger, firmer tone, echoed in memory. "Trust your nose, boy. Don't doubt it. You're my partner." That partnership had ended when his joints stiffened. When running full tilt became too painful, yet tonight, under the cold watch of the moon, Max felt it again. Not retirement, not age. Duty. The trail veered toward the cabin where the air grew thicker with the stink of smoke and unwashed bodies. Max froze, lowering his belly to the ground. He inched forward, eyes narrowing, ears flicking. The cabin loomed. Ahead, boards nailed over windows, a crooked roof sagging in the center. Through the cracks drifted faint sound, the snores of men, the creak of a chair. Max's nose twitched. The girls were inside. Back on the logging road, Martha conferred with her team. "The tracks head toward the old cabins near the ridge," she said quietly. "We'll set up a perimeter." Mason tugged at her sleeve. "Chief, that's where the school bus used to drop us off for field trips. There's a trail that cuts behind near the creek. If they know the woods, they could use it to get away. Martha studied him, then nodded. Good eye. You stay in the car now, Mason. Let us handle it. But Mason's mind whirled. He had always followed Lily and Hazel on adventures, always tried to keep up. Tonight was no different. Except the stakes were life itself. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching shadows flicker between trees. Martha returned to her vehicle, her voice steady, but her stomach tight. She thought of Linda's pale face, David's clenched fists, the photo of the twins on the office desk. Hold on, girls, she prayed silently. We're coming. Max crouched lower, his body pressed against the earth. The moon broke briefly through the clouds, lighting the cabin in silver. The shepherd's tail brushed the dirt low and still. He could hear the girls' muffled breathing, smell their fear as clear as smoke. His muscles ached. His shoulder burned where the dart had pierced, but his mind was sharp. He waited, patient as stone, every sense tuned to the moment. The cabin groaned under the weight of silence. Inside, the men shifted in drunken sleep. Outside, Max's breath came slow and steady. His eyes glimmered in the moonlight. The trail had ended here. He had found them. The cabin creaked like an old ship on a black sea, its boards straining against the chill wind that swept down from Therridge. Inside, the only light came from a lantern left burning low on the table, its flames shivering against the cracked glass. The kidnappers had collapsed in a drunken stupor, their snores uneven and harsh. One leaned back in the chair, mouth open, while the other sprawled on the floor with an empty bottle clutched to his chest. From beneath the wall, where two planks had rotted enough to leave a narrow opening, a shadow slipped in. Max pressed his shoulders low, forcing his aging frame through the gap. His fur scraped against the wood, his breath quiet but determined. The faint glow inside caught the silver at his muzzle, but his amber eyes were sharp, steady. He paused, listening. The men muttered in their sleep, but did not stir. The air wire of alcohol, sweat, and rope, and beneath it, familiar, beloved, was the scent of Lily and Hazel. The twins lay huddled in the corner, bound tightly. Their eyes widened as they recognized the silhouette of their guardian. Hazel's gag muffled a cry of relief, while Lily's tears slipped silently down her cheeks. Max padded forward, claws soft against the wooden floor. He lowered his head, muzzle working at the ropes, his teeth clamped down, tugging, grinding fibers loose. The rope tasted of dust and sweat, rough against his gums, but he did not falter. Hazel held still, her small wrist trembling as Max gnawed. Bit by bit, the rope began to fray. He shifted to Lily's bindings, pulling at the knots, his jaw working with the patience of training drilled years before. The fibers finally gave way with a snap. Lily flexed her hands, then reached to untangle Hazel's bonds. Their legs were next, knots tight, but Max bit until the coarse strands loosened. At last, both girls were free. Lily pressed a finger to her lips, signaling silence. Hazel clutched her sister's arm, trembling, but ready. Max nudged them toward the gap in the wall, tail low, ears forward. They had taken only 2 steps when the chair scraped across the floor. One of the men, the tall one in camo, stirred his. Eyes opened, glassy but sharp enough to register what he saw. 2 small figures moving toward the door, guided by a dog. What the? His voice broke into a shout. He stumbled up, knocking the lantern. Hazel froze, paralyzed. Lily pulled her forward, but the man was already lunging. His boots thundered against the boards. Max whirled, a deep growl erupting from his chest. His teeth flashed white in the dim light as he hurled himself forward. The impact knocked the man off balance, sending him crashing into the table. Bottles clattered, one shattering against the floor. The scarred kidnapper jerked awake, swearing loudly. The cabin erupted into chaos. Shouts filled the air, mingling with Hazel's muffled sob and Lily's ragged breasts. Max stood firm, body tense, positioning himself between the men and the girls. He barked, sharp, commanding, the bark of a dog who had once halted criminals on darker nights than this. The kidnappers cursed, one scrambling for a knife, the other groping for the door. The racket carried into the forest, echoing through the trees like a signal. Not far away, the police had taken their positions. Martha Green crouched behind the wheel of her patrol car, her breath misting in the cold air. She listened, head tilted slightly. Then it came, the unmistakable sound of a German shepherd's bark, fierce and urgent, cutting through the night. Her eyes sharpened. "That's Max," she said. "They're in there. Move!" Deputies surged forward. Carl Henderson led the charge on the left flank, his tall frame blending into the shadows as he motioned silently. Another officer, Tanya Ruiz, a compact woman in her late 20s with dark hair tucked under a beanie, sprinted to the right. Tanya had joined the force after years working in community outreach. Her reputation was for swift, decisive action and a heart that still broke at every child's cry. Mason, left in the car with another officer, pressed his face to the window. He saw the beams of flashlights slash through the trees, heard the crunch of boots, his fists clenched around the straps of his backpack. He wanted to run in to help, but all he could do was whisper, "Please find them." Inside, the scarred man lunged toward Lily. Max intercepted him, teeth sinking into the man's sleeve, dragging him back. The man howled, swinging wildly. The tall one managed to grab Hazel's arm, but she twisted, screaming behind her gag. Lily threw herself at her sister, pulling her away. Then the door burst open. "Police, drop it!" Martha strode in, weapon raised, her voice thunderous in its authority. Carl followed, flashlight beam blinding the men. Tanya circled swiftly, grabbing Hazel and Lily, pulling them behind her. The scarred man tried to rush the back window, but Max lunged again, clamping down on his leg until Carl tackled him to the floor. The taller man lifted his knife, but Martha fired a warning shot into the ceiling. The blade clattered from his hand as deputies swarmed him. It was over in seconds, though for Lily and Hazel it felt like an eternity. Their bodies shook as Tanya cut away the gags and ropes, murmuring soothing words. "You're safe now, sweethearts. You're safe." At the doorway, David appeared, his face pale and drawn, eyes frantic. He had insisted on coming despite Martha's warnings, his heart unwilling to stay behind. When he saw the girls, he dropped to his knees, arms outstretched. Lily, Hazel. The twins ran to him, collapsing against his chest. David held them as though he would never let go again, his shoulders trembling with sobs. "I'm sorry," he whispered over and over, burying his face in their hair. "Daddy's here. You're safe." Max limped. Toward them, fur ruffled, muzzle wet with sweat and blood not his own. David reached out with one arm, pulling the shepherd close. "You saved them," he choked, voice breaking. "You saved my girls. Good boy, Max. My brave boy." Martha lowered her weapon, relief washing across her features. She caught Tanya's eye, and the younger officer gave a firm nod, her expression fierce but softened by the sight of the reunited family. Carl tightened the cuffs on the scarred man, his face grim but satisfied. Outside, the radios crackled with confirmation. Perimeter secured, suspects in custody. The cabin still smelled of rot and fear, but for the first time that night, hope filled its hollow spaces. Morning came quietly to Willow Creek, the mist lifting from the pine ridges as though the town itself was exhaling after holding its breath all night. The sun rose golden and soft, spilling over rooftops, glinting off church windows, and warming the damp earth. The town had survived storms before, floods, winters, the long decline of the old mill. But what happened in the dark forest had left a different mark, one carved not into wood or stone, but into the hearts of its people. At the Brown household, the air smelled of coffee and cinnamon toast. Linda moved about the kitchen with eyes still swollen from tears, but glowing now with relief. She had brushed Hazel's hair into neat braids tied with pink ribbons. Lily, ever the quieter one, sat at the table, drawing on a scrap of paper, her green eyes focused, but calmer than the night before. Max lay stretched out on the rug near the fireplace, his bandaged shoulder rising and falling with steady breaths. Every so often, Hazel would dart from her chair to bury her face in his fur, whispering something only the dog could hear. His tail thumped faintly in reply. A knock came at the door. David rose quickly, his heart still attuned to fear. But when he opened it, the figure standing there was no threat. Elias Turner, a county detective in his mid-30s, stood on the porch, tall and broad-shouldered. His sandy brown hair was cut short, his square jaw softened by a faint stubble. His navy jacket bore the wear of long nights on patrol, and his eyes, gray-blue and steady, carried a weight that was both professional and deeply personal. He had been part of the team coordinating with Martha, and he had rushed into danger without hesitation. "Morning," Elias said, his voice low but warm. "I hope I'm not intruding." David clasped his hand firmly. "Your family now. You saved ours." Aya shook his head. "Your dog saved them and your daughters. They were braver than most grown men I've met." Hazel peeked from behind Linda's skirt, then darted forward to hug him before she lost her nerve. "Thank you," she mumbled, cheeks flushed. Lily joined, quieter, but with the same fierce gratitude shining in her eyes. Elias knelt, his large hands resting gently on their shoulders. "No," he said softly. "Thank you. You held on. You gave us time to find you." Max lifted his head, ears flicking. Elias reached out, scratching gently behind the shepherd's ear. "And you, partner?" "I've worked with canines before. I've seen courage, but you?" He smiled, the weariness in his eyes giving way to respect. "You're something else." Linda pressed her hands to her mouth, tears spilling again, though this time they were warm, cleansing. David drew his arm around her shoulders, voice thick. "We'll never take another day for granted. Not ever again." Weeks later, the courthouse of Willow Creek filled in a way it hadn't in years. The building, a squat structure of gray stone, echoed with murmurs as townsfolk squeezed onto benches, reporters scribbling at the back. At the front, two men sat shackled, their faces pale and hardened. The taller one stared at the floor, jaw clenched, while the scarred man glared defiantly at anyone who looked his way. Judge Miriam Alden, a woman in her late 50s with silver hair drawn into a severe bun, presided over the trial. Her voice was calm even, but carried the weight of finality. She had grown up in Willow Creek herself, had walked the same streets as these families, and she held no patience for cruelty. Her glasses perched low on her nose as she read the charges: kidnapping of minors, attempted extortion, endangerment of life. The defense tried to argue desperation, poverty, mistakes, but the evidence was overwhelming. Ropes found in the cabin, the green truck with his cracked tail light, the recordings of the ransom call. Witnesses spoke. Martha, calm and resolute. Carl, steady in his account of the arrest. Even Mason, small but determined, describing what he had overheard in the store. His voice shook, but when he finished, the courtroom applauded softly until the judge tapped her gavel. When the sentences were read, 35 years each in state prison without parole, the room erupted. Neighbors clapped, tears shining in their eyes. Some cheered, others simply sat in silence, the weight of justice settling over them. David held Linda's hand tightly, his daughter sitting between them, their faces pressed into his side. Outside, the square had gathered with nearly the entire town. A platform had been raised beneath the maple tree, and banners fluttered in the breeze. The mayor, Gregory Vance, A tall man with a kindly face and a slow, thoughtful way of speaking stepped forward. His gray suit was modest but neat, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. "Last night," he said, "our town faced darkness. And in that darkness, courage burned bright." He turned toward the Browns and gestured for Max. The shepherd limped forward, with David's guiding hand. His ears twitched as the crowd broke into applause. The mayor held up a small silver medallion attached to a velvet collar. "For distinguished service, for bravery under threat, for loyalty beyond measure, we honor Max, the guardian of Willow Creek." He lowered the medal onto the dog's chest. The crowd rose to its feet. Applause thundered through the square, echoing off the buildings. Children waved flags. Elderly neighbors wiped their eyes, and Hazel cheered loudest of all. Lily leaned against her sister, whispering, "He looks proud." Max sat tall, tail thumping once against the wooden boards, amber eyes calm yet glimmering as if he understood. Life in Willow Creek did not return to what it had been. It became something stronger. David and Linda decided to move the family into a small duplex near the town center, close enough to neighbors in the clinic where Linda now took the girls for checkups. The new home was modest but warm, filled with light and the smell of fresh bread. Max had a thick new bed near the hearth, though more often than not he slept at the foot of the twins' shared bed, keeping silent vigil. One Saturday morning, as the last of the snow melted from the ridges, Lily, Hazel, and Mason walked to the edge of the forest. They carried a small maple sapling wrapped in burlap, a spade borrowed from David's shed, and a strip of red ribbon cut from Linda's old dress. The air was crisp, the sky washed clear. They stopped near the place where the girls had once been dragged from the trail, where Max had woken in the dark to begin his search. The earth was hard at first, but together they pressed the spade down, carving a small hollow. Hazel held the sapling while Lily covered the roots with soil. Mason tied the ribbon around the young trunk, hands careful, though his fingers trembled slightly. When it was done, the three of them stepped back. The sapling swayed gently in the breeze, fragile yet unbroken. Hazel whispered, "Do you think it'll grow?" "It will," Lily said quietly, her eyes steady. "It has to." Mason nodded, brushing dirt from his hands. "It's a reminder that even when it's dark, morning comes." Max stood beside them, ears prick-cricked, tail swaying slowly. The sun rose higher, gilding the branches with gold. The forest still held its shadows. But before them now stood a symbol of new beginnings. The twins reached for each other's hands, Mason beside them, Max at their side. Together they watched the small tree catch the light, proof that even in the place where fear had once ruled, love could root itself deep and reach toward the sky. In The Quiet After the Storm, the story of Willow Creek leaves us with a truth that feels timeless. Miracles do not always arrive with thunder or flashing light. Sometimes they come on 4 tired paws in the steady heartbeat of a father who refuses to give up, in the unspoken courage of children who cling to one another in the dark. God often works through the ordinary, through neighbors who listen, officers who act, and through the love that binds families together when fear tries to tear them apart. And so the message is clear. Even in our everyday lives, where struggles may not look like midnight rescues, we are still called to notice, to protect, and to love, to be the hands that untie ropes, the voices that speak. When silence feels safer, the light that reminds others they are not forgotten. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to stay with us for more stories of faith, love, and resilience. May God bless you and watch over you and your family, guiding your steps with His quiet miracles each